Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a video on Storybook, specifically Storybook integrated with Vue JS, Vue and TypeScript. I did a video in the beginning of the week on Angular. Folks who follow my channel know I do a lot of Vue, and so I wanted to show how to do it in Vue. I have actually solved this problem already because someone in the Discord channel was stuck and asked, and so I just quickly threw together a gist, I forget how you say it, which showed how to do it. But I'm going to integrate it into a full app this time around and upload the source code for the project for everyone. So hang on, let's get to the code. Please make sure you like and subscribe first. So let's get to the project. So here is a basic Ionic project that I've created. It uses TypeScript. This is the basic app. This one has a home page in it already. We're gonna, as usual, take out all the stuff in the home page that we don't want. So let's just take all of this out. I want the full screen true. I don't want the double headers, so let's rip this out. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a component to use inside a Storybook. But first, let's make sure that this all runs fine. And so let's put some text in here. P story book view. And let's come down here and run this thing. Ionic I-O-N-I-C serve. And so here we are, and this is my app. Now let's go back to here. Actually, let's go back to the documentation because we're going to follow the documentation for a while. So here first we need to install Storybook. Also, I got burned on this. Please make sure you cannot do npx Storybook. You have to do latest or else it will not work and your project will get jacked up. So make sure you do Storybook latest. So let's copy that. And let's go back here, and we're down here in terminal now, and let's just create a new terminal. And we're going to execute that code. So let that. And this will install everything that you need to make Storybook work in your Vue project. Basically, Storybook's going to set up its own server, and it will run the components that you create stories for inside its server container. So that's what we're going to do. And so the trick here is that if you notice with Ionic, in main TS, first of all, we import all these styles, so we need to get all these styles over. And the other thing is that it does also use this Ionic Vue plugin. So we need to get that set up so that everything runs properly on the Storybook server when the Storybook server tries to run. So this is running, and I guess it's going to take a while to run. So let's wait for this to finish up. Okay, so it is all installed, and then the next thing that you do is you do npm run Storybook. And so now Storybook gets all set up. These are stories, so this is a button story, and this is the button is a component that actually, am I zoomed in here? Let me see. Yeah, button is the component that you're testing, and these are different stories: a primary story, a secondary story, and basically what you're doing in the story is you're changing the properties that get passed into it to see how it's going to look. And so we're going to do the same thing with an Ionic project. With an Ionic component. And what I also like to do is just build upon what is there already. So let's start off by making the changes that are going to be necessary to get this to run appropriately. So if we go inside of, let's find Storybook up at the top. One of the first things that we need to do here is get all the Ionic CSS in. And so I just take the easy way. I go to my main TS. Actually, no, I'm not going to put them in my main. I'm going to put them in my preview. So I go to my main TS and I just copy everything. Well, not everything, all the CSS stuff. Let's take the Ionic Vue because we're going to need that also. So let's copy that and let's go over to preview. And I'm going to go up here and just put a comment, Ionic stuff, and paste that stuff in there. Like I said, we do need the plugin because we need to kind of make sure that the plugin is being utilized. We've imported all the styles so that we can make sure all these, since this is the preview component, this will make sure that all these styles are also loaded when we're trying to load our story, which will require the view styles. So let's save this. The other thing that we need to do is from Storybook View 3 here, we can load setup. So this will give us access to the app, which is what we need for Ionic. So we just come down here and we say setup. And this is going to return the app. And then all we do is say app use Ionic Vue. And let's make sure this is all compiled nicely. What's going on here? Oh, it can't find a theme because the paths are off a bit because we're inside a storybook. So let's see. So now we are set for our story. So to get this going, let's make a small, we're going to make a small story first, and then we're going to make a bigger story. We'll make a small story to show how the Ionic components work. So I'm just going to take the content that I used to solve the problem for those of you who've looked at the gist already, and then I'll create a more complex component. So first, let's create a simple one. All right, and so that simple story that I created was an Ionic button. So let's just say Ionic button. And stories.ts. And we'll drop the code in here. But it doesn't have the button. So this is a story. So let's create the button. And this is the code for the button. And let's just quickly walk through what this button is. It's pretty straightforward. We're really just showing how we will get the styling and everything associated with Ionic components here. So we have a button. It has a click event, an on-click event, and it has a property label, which we'll use for the title of the button. So you can see it imports Ionic button. It has its default properties. The property is just a label for the button. We set a default value for the property label to be test button, and then it emits a click event. And that is it. So we don't need this number on here. We just need it to emit a click. Let's take this number off of here. So that's what my button does. It emits a click. So now let's do the story. So let's go over here in the story. For our story, we're importing our Ionic button view, which I'm not certain why this isn't taking it, but let's see. Okay, there you go. So now it's imported. So let's walk through our story here. These are default imports that come from Storybook. We need to import the Ionic app because we're using it down here in our decorator. Put a comment here, wrap component in Ion app. Here's the title of the button. It can be set in a hierarchy. So see, I have example Ionic button. So let's change this so you can see Ionic components. Let's say that. So now when you go to your page here, you can see we have their Ionic components, then under that will be all of our specific components. And right now this is our Ionic button. As you can see, it's working with the, it's rendering the button, it's using the Ionic styles, which is what we needed. So that's our button. It supports an action of type clicked. It has a default label of test button. Then here we define our story object, and then here's where you define your different stories. So this is my default story, which I pass in a property, a button name of primary to label, and for the secondary story, I change the name to secondary. So that's really what you need to do to make it work. So let's go back and let's look at this. And so if we say primary, we can see I have a button with the name primary. If I click on secondary, we see we have a button with the name secondary. The other thing we want to take notice of is the events. And so you can see when I click on my button, I'm getting my event. My click event is being passed through, and that's helpful so you can use it to test to make sure it's getting the behavior that you want. So that's the quick component, and it's integrated, but now I'm going to add a more complex component like the one that I used in the Angular version. And it's this component that's called a membership card. And so, because in reality, you won't stick your Ionic components in here with the stories. The idea is that your components exist inside of your application. So let's actually, just for consistency, so no one's confused, let's do that. So we're going to take, do I have a components? Actually, let's come down here and create a components directory. So this is how it will be in the real world. And we're going to take our Ionic button and we're going to stick it inside of our components. Right? So let's move it there. Because ideally what would happen is inside of your app, so let's go to home page, Storybook Vue, you would have Ionic button. And label, I believe, is the property. Label, oh sorry, label is button and component. Right, and so now let's import Ionic button view, and so we now have our button imported right there. It got auto imported. And so our Ionic button is here. It has a label of string. And now let's go back to our app. Now we're in our app and we can see we have our button here. So this is how it should work. So now let's add this other component. So it's called a member component, and it's basically just like a card. So for example, if you had a website that showed all of your employees, you had a specific card designed for each one of them. That's what this component is. So let me, I don't want to walk through the code. So I'm just going to drop in the code and walk through it and create. So I've added the code for the more complex component, and it's called member card. So let's take a look at what it looks like running. So this is our application, and so this is our original button that we did earlier, and this is the member card. It has a name, it has a company, it has a title, space for bio, and then buttons for social media that if the values are provided, they render. If not, they don't render. So that's one of the things that we can test with our story. Also, the way the title is, if no title is provided, it should not draw this kind of colon with the CEO. If no company is provided, but a title is, it should just show the title. If neither is provided, it should probably show nothing. So those are different, quote, stories or scenarios with this component. Now let's, but I'll walk through the code, but also I will provide a project to this. So it's basically just an Ion card component. We have the name, here's the company name, the title, the information for the bio, and then here's all the social media buttons where we only display them if we have a value. And then when the user clicks on the button, we have an event called social clicked, and we send basically the URL of the string that was associated with that value on the click event. And we duplicate that for Twitter and for the website. And that is basically it. Down here, we've imported all of the Ionic components that we need. We've imported the ion icons. We have exported the type of the property that is passed. This member info property is of type member info, and it is required. And then down here we have our emits, where we define our emit of social clicked, and here we handle the click. So when the click happens on a button, we figure out which really, I mean, we pass event, we don't really need to, but most importantly, it's a string, and then we emit the social clicked event with the string value, and then let's see what it looks like when we actually use it in a page. So let's go to our home page, and if you look at our home page, see if I can format this. You can see that basically what we do is we have our property called member info, and we pass in parameters, and here we just kind of fill out the whole thing. And here we have our handle click event, and on the handle click event we call do handle click, and we pass in the string, and we just, for now, we just alert to let you know. You probably want to open a web view with the value so that it could take the user to the social media or to the web page. So let's take another look at the app. And so you can see when I click on my button, oh, why is this not working? So let's see. Oh, I'm not handling, that's the incorrect event. So let's see, social clicked is the proper event. So on social click, then we call do handle click. So that was a bug in my code. So let's go back here, and so I'm getting the alert indicating that the buttons were clicked. And so what we'll do now is we'll see how you set up a story to support all this. So let's go to the member card story. And we're following the same pattern you see at the top. We're importing the card. On the member card from the component, we changed our name for the title to Ionic Components to member card. The component, once again, it's decorated the same. We're still embedding it inside of the app. Here's something that's a little different for the argument types. So there's the on social clicked argument type, and we want it to show up with the action in the panel. And so we're basically mapping this, when we get an on social clicked event, we're mapping it to an action to just say social clicked and render whatever values we have provided. There's no default arguments. And then down here we create our primary stories, and this is our primary story where we're passing in the values into member info. We could, in theory, use our member info here. I believe, can I do this? Member, can I define my type here? Oh, that's not what I want. How do I thought there'd be a way I could define my types and not have to guess on them. So, or is it doing it for me? Let's see. Yeah, because I thought on the, let's go back to my Ion button. I thought that there'd be some way for it to import my argument types for me, but it looks like it doesn't do that. Let's take this away. No, here it knows that the label is an argument. So what's different here? That's interesting. I'll have to do a little bit more research and see why it's getting that argument appropriately. Let's see, is there something I'm doing different with the way I define my button? Let's see, Ionic, where's my Ionic button? Define props, label string. Let's see, and now go to my member card. Define props. It might be because, hold on, let me put this side by side and see. So that's the button, and that's it. No, that's define. That shouldn't be it. So it's define props. I wonder if it's because the way I'm using it. I bet that's it. So let's try it this way. Define props, and we put this type around the outside like this, and then we call it. Is that what they're doing? Define props. Of an object member info. They're just doing this. See if I can just drop this type on there. I thought you couldn't do this with Vue. All right, that looks a little bit closer to what they have. Let's see if that fixes the issue. So now if I go back to my story and I look at my args here, nope, that didn't seem to do it. Let's try one last thing. Let's kill this and try to run this again. While that's running, let's make sure I didn't break anything. So the card's still working. Let's see. My stories are still kicking off the right event, but really what I was trying to do was to see if I can get some TypeScript help here for my arguments. So like down here, I want to do my secondary story. And it's not giving me my arguments. And I can't, like up here, when I hover, oh, well, it's showing member info. I'm going to have to do some more research and see why it's not letting me, why I'm not getting the value of TypeScript inside of here. But let's go ahead and do the second story. So we're going to just copy all of these arguments, and we're going to say no company, and we will remove the company name, and then we'll do another one, and we'll say no title. No titles required. So is title required? Let's see. title's required, company name isn't. So we're going to say here, all social. Actually, let's just copy them from my home. We got all the social in there. And then let's do no social. And that'll be the last one. Okay, and so now let's look at what the stories look like. So let's refresh this. And this is our primary. This is our no company, so the UI changes as we wanted. All social. All socials there, and then no social. And it removes them all. So this was, like I said, just a high-level walkthrough to show you how to create stories that are integrated with Ionic Framework. The really important part, I guess, is to, let's close this window, make sure that you use a decorator to wrap everything in Ion app, and to make sure that in preview you load in the plugin and you load in all of the Ionic components. I hope you found this helpful. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.